Poke the Bear is brought to you by Prize Picks and the Game Time app.
And welcome into Poke the Bear episode 302, presented by Prize Picks and Game Time Tickets. My name is Conor Ryan, and once again we are joined by the knowledgeable, the ever-studious, the hockey expert, some say, the streets are saying.
Who says that? Nobody says that.
The streets, dude. You just ask anyone. Ty Anderson of 98.5 The Sports Hub. Ty, how you doing?
What's going on today? How are we feeling?
It's the same old Ty. When you look at this Bruins team, it feels like I've compared this Bruins season to Tony Soprano when he's in the coma and he's Kevin Finnerty and he's trying to find his briefcase for about 3 episodes, and he's got Steve Buscemi trying to usher him into a house. He's just in this limbo. That's what I feel this Bruins season is. It's the last season of Sopranos. They're kind of going through the motions here and there. And I think that's exemplified based on the fact that Bobby Bacala was at the Bruins-Rangers game at Madison Square Garden on Wednesday. But I think that loss to the Rangers 3-2 sums up what we've talked about weeks on end, months on end, right? Where you feel good about where this team's game is. Seems like they're kind of scraping together any sort of momentum, and it falls to the wayside, and all of their flaws get put on display. What did you kind of see from Wednesday's loss to the New York Rangers?
Well, I mean, you want something to feel good about, right? And instead you get 16 seconds of total offense from the team. Rangers tie it up, which, again, it shows limitations of sort of, as we've talked about week after week with this team, the limitations, and as you mentioned, they come to the table. Basically, in every loss or on the way to every loss, their fatal flaws are exposed or their limitations on their roster. Look at that second period, right? You get 2 great penalty kills, almost back-to-back even. And then you score your goals. You're up 2-1. You're feeling good. And then you take a penalty. You know, Marchand knows he's not going to get the benefit of the doubt, but it's not a matching penalty. But either way, you can't really kill that one off. I know it's not a power play goal technically, but it kind of was because Marchand's not even in the play yet when it scored. Yeah. So now the game is tied. Okay, like, not great, but you're not feeling horrible. You get a power play midway through the period. You're like, all right, here's the chance. Go ahead goal, put him away. Doesn't happen, right? And I think what's really interesting about that is that if you look at the play itself, again, it's a limitation of this roster. It is Matty Poitras on the wall trying to feed Morgan Geekie in a bumper-ish kind of position on the ice for a one-timer. Geekie kind of flubs the pass a little bit, or the pass isn't perfect. He bobbles it, and now the Rangers are off to the races. And it's funny because you look at that and you go, on how many teams in the NHL is Morgan Geekie, who has had a great year, playing the bumper on your second power play unit? Like, on how many teams is he doing that, right? But this is sort of the limitation of this roster that we've seen time and time again, is that when you need that extra oomph, that extra whatever it is, this team often falls short through no fault of their own. It's just they are who they are.
Yeah, and it's almost like even look earlier in that game too, in terms of just the personnel. And I think, you've touched on this before, Ty. It's like when we do the post-mortem of what this season has been and all that's gone wrong, if you want, and there's a lot of things you can look at, right? The roster construction, you can look at the Montgomery and how that went sideways. Special teams, we'll have an entire summer, unfortunately, to break down all the things that's gone wrong. It comes down to the talent, right? Like, in terms of guys that are being put in spots either above their pay grade, above what they should be asked, and just not having enough horses. Like, you look at, as you said, that play with Geekie where he flubs the pass, where, again, it's on your power play unit there. You're expecting a guy like him to cash in. And again, as you said, he's had a good year, but we're 2 years ago from, Taylor Hall being on your third line, right? Like, you just don't have the same personnel there. And then you look earlier, or actually later in that game, where they're trying to press for an extra goal there. And you've got Cole Koepke, who, again, started off really strong, but is what he is, right, as a fourth-line guy, bumped up into a third-line spot, gets a great feed, can't finish it. We didn't see the replay, of course, because it's a national broadcast, but based on the way they were reacting to, the side of the net that was open, you would think that he had, an empty net to shoot the puck into. And, it's unfortunately, he can't finish there, but when you have guys in those spots, and they're not able to deliver it, it's also just an indictment on just the lack of talent you have. Like you can, and that's why I think you look at this team, like when they play well, you can kind of you can fall into the same trap of like, hey, if they play this style of hockey, this brand of hockey, they can grind things out. You saw that on that Tuesday game against the Wild where they played really well, and you're like, man, like Wild are a good team. They were the best, I think, road team in the NHL going into that game. And again, you're not expecting Swayman to have a shutout every game, but you play that style of hockey, you can grind through some of these wins and be a competitive team. That's what you hope for. And then you have that game against the Rangers, and yes, they weren't, blown out like these like last couple of losses to New Jersey or anything like that. But in a game like that where you need to have, right, you need to break through, you need to get the points where they're so critical, it just comes down to the fact they just don't have the horses to consistently do that. Maybe they, like, again, and we'll probably fall into the same routine on Saturday, like maybe they grind down Vegas and gut their way to a win. That's all well and good, but like, that water's going to find its level, right? And like, that eventually they're going to be in one of these games coming out of the break where it's going to be 2-2 or something in the third. They're going to have a quality chance they can't finish because they don't have guys in spots to kind of bury those chances. And it's going to come back to bite them. That's how I just view it. It's all but inevitable as to what is going to play out if they just kind of keep this status quo. They can be competitive at times, but they just don't have the horses to do it.
Yeah, and I think to sum it all up, they're required to play almost perfect hockey every night, and no team is perfect. And the spot that they're in is the spot that they're in, right? The games played work against them. They have teams that they are chasing, and about 5 teams that are chasing them at the same time. It's a hard, way to live, but this is a spot they're in, right? And so they have to be perfect almost every night. And that's really hard. Like, it's just not, I know that sounds simple, but like, or obvious rather, but like they got to play almost perfect every night. And it's not sustainable for them. Like, they really feel like a team that does not win the game unless their goaltender posts a 950 or if David Pastrnak has a takeover. If those things don't happen, sometimes they have to happen at the same time. They don't win, and they really struggle. I was looking this up after the game on Wednesday night. The Bruins now have had games where Jonas Korpisalo, whenever he has under an 870, they don't win, right? Yeah. And I mean, how many goaltenders, if you have below an 870, how many you're gonna win that? How many often you're gonna win that game? But they can't handle a goaltender not having a good night, right? And I'm sitting here watching that game on Wednesday, and I see the Kreider shorthanded goal, and I go, I kind of want to save there. I know it's a 2-on-1, but Korpisalo is like not even close to making that save, and I want to save there. But then I'm going, you idiot, why are you blaming the goaltender when they've scored 2 goals in this entire game, and they both came at a 16-second stretch? Like, outside of that, where's their offense, right? And so, but that's where we are right now. Like, you have to look at every single game and go, oh, I need a save there. Oh, I need a finish there. And I'm saying, is that fair of me to ask that out of Jonas Korpisalo? And is that fair to me to ask out of Morgan Geekie? And, Oliver Wahlstrom, who, we've picked on various episodes. Like, they kind of are what they are, man. And that's what it is. And that's the team that they've built. And I think now, like, yeah, as you said, water is finding its level. Like, that's kind of where they are. And even if they win tomorrow, even if they win on Saturday against the Vegas Golden Knights, and you want to feel good about it, well, guess what? Now they're going on a break for 2 weeks. So there goes that momentum. That team lost momentum when they had a win on December 23rd and then broke for 4 days. Imagine what it's going to be like when you take 2 whole weeks off now. So it is what it is, but the standard for this team is perfection, and that's not fair, and that's not sustainable. And it's just, I don't think it's going to happen. And so that's the frustrating part. But again, it does come back to what we've both said. They don't have enough talent. And it's a hard way to live for 82 games, and especially the spot that they're in, where they have to be a grind team with no exceptions, with no letdown for 30 straight games? Like, that's a really hard way to live. And that's kind of the spot they're in right now. And I just don't know if they can do that. I don't know if any team can do that, for that matter. It's a very hard way to live. The Islanders have to do that right now, and I think that's the one team I look at and go, maybe they could, but it's a really hard way to it's a really hard way to live, man. It's just this league is just, we've talked about this before. Like, there's so much speed and there's so much skill and there's so much energy, right? And there are too many nights where we're going, the Bruins don't have enough speed, skill, or energy right now.
Yeah.
It's a tough math equation, I think.
Yeah, no, it's the way that it plays out, and it's also like I can see. I think I might have like a few pages ahead of like what the Bruins script is this season because like what's going to happen? We know what's going to happen. They're going to beat Vegas. They're going to go into the break with a win, and people are going to be feeling good. Kind of like remember the December 23rd really good game against the Capitals where you're like, oh damn, that's a hell of a way to go into the break.
Yep.
And then they're going to come back. They play February 22nd at home against the Anaheim Ducks, and they will lose that game. Like that is what's going to happen. Like it's what happened right after that Capitals game, right? They dropped what 7 or their first 8 games coming out of the break. Like it's just, and again, I don't even expect it to like snowball to that degree where you're going to be in these just rudderless stretches, but that's what this team is. Like you just don't have the personnel to consistently win. I mean, how many times have they won 3 games in a row this year? Once? Is that it?
Yes, they have one win streak of over 3 games. It's happened once. I mean, it was a 4-game win streak. That was, I think, during that stretch. I want to say,
yeah, pretty during that softer part of the schedule too, right? So
I believe so. Yeah. It was into the Sacco bump, like that. That was happening at that point. That was the. Yep, I'm looking it up now. Started on the Centennial game. And then extended through that Flyers overtime win, and then the next game they got smoked 8-1 in Winnipeg. That was that whole run there.
Yes, yeah, exactly. The murderer's row that they had to deal with leading up to that. So yeah. I feel like we know what's going to happen there. But as the Bruins do come back from break, we'll have a little bit more to break down in terms of what their plans are going to be. I know we've been talking about the trade deadline nonstop. We still got a month away. Please, everyone, stick with us as we wait for the Bruins to make a decision. But before we dive more into that, Ty, take a quick break here from our good friends over at Prize Picks. The big game is almost here, and it's now or never. So don't miss out on the last football game of the season with Prize Picks, the best place to win cash while watching the big game. Prize Picks is also giving away a free pick for the big game, where one of the starting quarterbacks will only need to throw 1 yard to win. If you're correct on at least one more stat projection, you can win real cash. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just need to pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash as you run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play just $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks is the best way to win real money this football season. Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on Prize Picks. Check out the promos tab to tail any of our Super Sweat Millie winner big game lineups. If you tail a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split of $1 million in promo funds. Prize Picks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. Prize Picks also invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. There's no shortage of ways to participate in Prize Picks, especially with the big game nearly upon us. This week on Prize Picks, I'm looking at the football board and selecting Patrick Mahomes for more than 230 passing yards and Saquon Barkley for more than 2 touchdowns. It's really that easy. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS on the Prize Picks app to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. Shout out once again to our good friends over at Prize Picks. Ty, looking at the Bruins and what their plans are now, obviously we heard from Don Sweeney on Wednesday during the TNT broadcast. A lot of it involved Team Canada and the Four Nations face-off, so not a whole lot that we can really glean from that. There was one question about the Bruins that I'm sure we've already delved into quite a bit in various other podcasts, but kind of towed the company line of what Cam Neely said, that if things don't go their way, they have to look at a different path, but also mapped out, they ideally want to improve, looked at Hampus Lindholm and the lift he's going to provide. So, again, like most Sweeney musings to the media, it's you kind of just have a toeing the line, figuring out kind of what exactly it means and trying to read the tea leaves. Usually it's a fruitless venture, I would say, but looking at not just, the multiple scenarios they can address here, right? Whether it's retooling, selling off guys, buying short-term, long-term. What do you think is like the Bruins, if they're mapping out these next couple months, what do you think is like their ideal plan of how they want to tackle these things? Not saying it's going to work, but how do you think they are trying to make the most of what has been a pretty rudderless season so far?
They don't want to sell. I mean, it's very obvious that they don't want to sell. I don't think they want to make any sort of seismic change. I think if anything, they want to try to make a kind of a hockey trade. I think there's been rumblings of that, bringing in a player that they see for the foreseeable future. Maybe another version of the Zaka trade, but on a higher end potentially. But like this is where it gets challenging, right? Like you're trying to parse through what Sweeney said, as you mentioned, and like it's really difficult because he kind of just says a lot of words, but they kind of don't mean much, or there's not a lot to be found within the answer. He won't even say the word sell, and neither will Cam Neely. Cam Neely's called it a retool. So it's kind of hard to project what that means. I think this is the final year that they are without a second round pick because of the Hampus Lindholm trade. Yeah. I believe they are also without a third round pick, I want to say, this year. I think they have a first and a fourth, and then all the picks after that. So like that's not great, in terms of if you're trading more futures, you don't really have a stacked cupboard, so to speak. But how I see them mapping it out is they are going to wait until the 11th hour, which is not the best. I mean, like it also might be what they have to do because it's very clear that Charlie Jacobs wants playoffs. He expects playoffs. And that's why he likes Cam and Don so much, because Cam and Don have always been win now kind of GMs and executives for that matter. They've never been guys that are particularly patient, as we've seen, and sometimes to a fault. Oftentimes to a fault, they are not patient. But I don't think they want to make like a seismic reconfiguration of their roster by the deadline. So I think they're going to wait until they've exhausted every avenue, and they wait until Hampus Lindholm comes back, as you noted. Here's my feeling with that. So Hampus Lindholm has missed half a season now, or over half a season's worth of games.
Yep.
With a major lower body injury.
Ouch.
So you're going to look at him and go, okay, not only are you coming back, but you're coming back and our season is on the line depending on how you play.
Yeah. Please fix our power play. Yeah.
I just don't love that. I don't love the the math there, or the weight you're putting on a guy who had obviously a major injury and is coming back. So if I look at it from that standpoint, I'm saying, don't you kind of know the answer? Don't you kind of know what you should do? If that's what you're saying right now. But I think that for them, like, they're going to wait until the 11th hour. And the problem there is that prices can fluctuate heavily between now and the 11th hour. Mikael Granlund and Cody Ceci, it's a package deal, goes for a first-round pick. Like,
wild.
Like, I look at that and I go, man, it might be a seller's market. And if it is, I don't know if I want to wait on the sidelines until March 7th at 2:50 p.m. to make my decisions when, prices could go down and guys that are fetching seconds and first and top prospects may now fetch a third or a fourth. It's like, well, at that point, you didn't do anything. And not only did you not sell and acquire some future assets, but you kind of kept the roster that you've had that has kind of told you that they are what they are by now. And so I think inactivity is the scariest thing, but I also think that it might be the most logical thing for this team, as scary as that sounds.
Yeah. And it's almost like, do you think, I'm starting to feel like from their perspective of what an ideal, I mean, I guess an ideal is just not selling anyone and everyone just starting to like shoot like extra 20% better than what they have. That's probably the ideal scenario. But for them, it's almost like, do they want to, get the best of both worlds in terms of like moving on from guys that aren't going to be here long term, like, selling Frederick, right, for a second or something like that when you're not going to retain him, getting that draft capital, while also like being on the market, not for, the guy I always toss out because I can't think of anyone else right now, but like Jason Zucker, like over 30 UFA, having actually a really good year for Buffalo, but not worth what he's going to cost, right? Like instead of going for that, you move on from guys that aren't part of your long-term future while seeing if you can strike a hockey trade to bring in someone that is part of that next equation. Because it's almost like I look at the way the Bruins are built, and I don't know if this is just like short-sighted on my part, but I also can't see the Bruins. Everyone's like, oh, just trade everyone, get all these first-round picks, bring in all these picks, and replenish the thing. I feel like the Bruins are looking at it, and maybe it's wrong for them to do that, but they're being like, is our best case like off-season like a clean slate and then just restocking with like 2 first-rounders? Or is it like, hey, let's find a 26-year-old winger who's like got term and can be a 20-goal, 50-point guy and add him to this group that already has Pasternak and Swayman and McAvoy and Lindholm and all that stuff. I feel like, like they should, like, I don't think they should like just trade the first round pick for anyone like that. But I feel like they're looking at more finding NHL talent to help right now and for the next 4 or 5 years, as opposed to like, all right, well, we do need to replenish the farm system. So like, yeah, I know Pasternak, you're 28 and you're dragging the corpse of this team to the playoffs, but like, just wait it out. I feel like they are looking to find ways to swing those hockey trades and not for rentals. And if it is rentals, they will be ripped accordingly, I think, by everyone. But I almost feel like I wonder if they do view it as like we saw off the guys that aren't here long term while trying to find those pieces that can fit into the equation moving forward. And again, that's a task easier said than done, right?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I think this is where things get really interesting for teams like the Bruins. Like, do they look at another team that's on the outside looking in that maybe didn't think that they would be as close as they were or as close as they are? Or do they have any guys that are pending UFAs or pending RFAs that they look at and go, we don't know if we can sign him or we don't know if we can pay him? And the Bruins say, we'll pay him. We don't care. Like, we need the talent. And so that's why I think hockey trade is more likely. But I mean, you said Frederick fetching a second-round pick. Like, he's got to start playing better to get that, right? Like, you'd think. But at the same time, like, if it's a seller's market, who knows? I mean, I'm all for I've said this on this podcast. I've said it on the radio before. I'm all for short-term pain for long-term gains. And if I have to hurt the overall depth of this year's roster to pick up an extra second-round pick, a couple of extra third-round picks, whatever the case may be, I do it. I do it because I listen, I'm desperate to believe in this team. I am desperate for a reason to throw my heart behind this roster and say, yep, if they get in, they're going to make some noise. It's going to be great. I haven't seen it yet. And every time I want to take it, it's bait. And I get bopped over the head with the Chris Kreider shorthanded goal or the Winnipeg Jets absolutely stomping the hell out of the Bruins. Like, and that's kind of where I'm at with it, where it's like, you know what? You had 55 games to show me something. I don't see it. I got to start thinking long-term. I got to start thinking future. I got to start seeing who is part of the equation and who is not. And those who are not, jettison, get some assets, and to your point, sort of reset the deck for next summer. And so, like we entered the year kind of earmarking money for guys. Okay, are those guys still here? Like, right? Like, I want certainty one way or another. And if you're not going to trade them, re-sign them so that we know what we're dealing with moving forward. I think that's where I'm at with it. Because I think that, let's stick with Frederick for a second, right? Do you think they're going to keep him? Like, do you have any reason to think right now they're going to keep him?
No,
there's no reason to. There's no reason to think that. He has not been super effective this year. They were talking contract with him as far as we knew back in training camp. There's been no progress there. We've seen how that plays out. We have seen that before, where you have early season talks, a deal doesn't come about, and then what happens? They stay at the deadline, and then what happens on July 1? They leave. And so if you have a fragmented team or an incomplete team, fragmented too strong, incomplete team, and you have that kind of guy, A, why should you believe they're going to keep him? And B, why should they keep him and not just try to get something for him versus, him leaving for nothing on July 1? Like, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think the biggest thing is just one, resetting the deck for this upcoming offseason, where you do have the ability to make some more moves. The cap is jumping up, but also that leads into like, just because the cap is jumping up doesn't mean you have to just now go through the exercise of like, well, that means I want Brock Besser and I want to save some money for Jack Eichel because he's definitely going to hit the market in 2 years. Like, can't do that. At the very least, it just gives you more flexibility, I think, the cap jumping up, and you're at least fortunate that you do have some foundational pieces in place who are already signed long term that are going to age pretty well, like between Pasternak and Swayman and McAvoy. Lindholm's contract's going to look great. If he's even just ends up being a really good second pairing D, like even that contract will look good for what he provides. Hell, like if Elias Lindholm's like just like a third line center, like he's going to be like market value, honestly, in like 3 years, which is still not ideal. You want more from the guy, but it's almost like a Coyle like contract, honestly, in another couple of years or so. So you do have flexibility. It's just how the Bruins view like what they can do and what they should do in terms of, because I can't imagine this team, even if they are desperate just to get into the playoffs and have a run at it, thinking that they're just a short-term rental or someone away from just getting in. Like, I think they have to be looking at that realistically, but I feel like there's the temptation of pursuing a hockey trade, because it almost feels like they would be more inclined to, instead of just hoarding picks and, having, another first round pick or 2 seconds or something like that and getting more prospects in the system, which is great. I feel like the emphasis still is going to be on finding established NHL talent with term to help out this current team moving forward. It's why, like, I always talked about JT Miller, and that didn't happen, but as much people freak out about that contract, I'm like, well, he's going to be good for the next 3-4 years. And David Pasternak's 28, McAvoy's 27. Like, you are in this kind of, I don't know if it's not a win now window based on the way they're playing, but there is some urgency, right, to how they have to kind of do this retool. It's an urgent retool, I guess, is maybe the best way to put it, at least in terms of how I imagine they're viewing it. And maybe that's short-sighted, maybe that's wrong, but that's how my gut feels they are looking at this team and what they need to do.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that I'm not sure if you saw this report or not, but David Pagnotta of the Fourth Period recently was talking about the Bruins and what they might do at the deadline, and he was asked about 2 of their pending UFAs, Frederick and Brazeau. And he kind of said, the Bruins are kind of going with the flow. No more flow.
I hope not.
No more go with the flow. You gotta figure out what you're doing with these guys, because I'm not saying they're going to net you revolutionary draft picks. That'd be crazy. But if they're not part of your plans, and if they've given you no indication that you're close to a contract extension, you make one final push, and then you make a trade. If the freaking Colorado Avalanche can do it with Mikko Rantanen, you can do it with Justin Brazeau and Trent Frederick. And if you can't, there's the door. Give me another GM, because I can't have indecision about Trent Frederick and Justin Brazeau when you have all of these needs and you have this incredible shortage of draft capital and prospect capital. Like, if those guys are going to hold you up by the deadline, no, I want a new front office. And so I don't mean to get all hot and bothered about those kind of guys, but like, you got to have direction here. The days of going with the flow, I think, are over, dude. And like, to your point, like, that is kind of where, that's where I land with that, where it's an aggressive retool, right? So you got to have an aggressive mindset. If Justin Brazeau is going to go quiet on you or vice versa when it comes to re-signing him, then you know what you want to do with him. You know how you feel about the player deep down. He might be good for your team right now, but if you're having pause on signing that kind of guy, or if he's having pause on what you're offering, then your decision has been made for you. So don't worry about it. Make the call. Make whatever call you want to make, but don't dance for a month if you don't have to. And that's kind of where they are right now, it feels like. And so that is the part that I think is very worrisome. If this is as an aggressive retool, as you said, you got to be aggressive, man. That's how, like, it's not Michael Scott line or Jim. You can't just stand there, man. You got to do something. Like, that's kind of what it is.
Yep, no, exactly. So it is still exactly a month, actually, from the trade deadline. So we got 4 more weeks of this tie as they go with the flow.
I'm sorry. I feel like we repeat ourselves a lot here, but like, this is what happens,
guys.
This is what happens when you have a team that has been unable to generate any momentum. for any sort of an extended period of time. And they had a stretch there, beginning with that game in Florida that they won, where they rattled off like I think they were 5-1-1 over 7 games, but the 2 losses felt like the end of the world because that's a spot that they're in, right? With the games played and the slow start, and so they got to play something close to that. They got to play 700 hockey basically, from here on out. And can they do that? I don't know. I mean, I have a feeling, but I as to their ability to do that, but we can't be sitting here 3 weeks from now and going, okay, well, they could do this, they could do that. Like, the path should be obvious by now, and I don't know if it's going the way we all think it might go. I'd almost like to be early to the party and help set the market versus making reactionary kind of returns, if you will, based on, okay, well, this player went for that, so we're not going to give you more than a third for that guy. Like, I think it helps to help set a market. You know who's good about that is Jim Rutherford. And no surprise, Vancouver goes out and makes 2 trades. Rutherford has always been a guy that has really kind of tried to strike and set the market before it's dictated for him, so to speak. And so Don Waddell is another guy who's done that in the past, now with Columbus. So we'll see what they do, if they have anything cooking up. Another team that's chasing the Bruins, or do they move ahead of them? I can't.
They are technically ahead, I think. I think Ottawa, as of we're recording Friday, I think it's Ottawa and Columbus, I think, are ahead of the Bruins right now. Columbus by 1 point.
Okay, so then they must have won last night. I was attending to other matters last night, but I picked one night not to watch hockey, and here we are. Lesson to be learned out there, kids. Always watch hockey. So we'll see what happens with those other teams, but I feel like the path is clear. It's just they don't want to admit it. They don't want to say the word. Like I said earlier, they don't want to say the word, and so I think if you're a Bruins fan, holy shit! By the way, that interview. 9 questions about Team Canada, including one about playing in the 1997 World Championships. Who gives a shit? Nobody cares about that.
It was so bad, dude. That was bad. And yes, 4 weeks ago until the actual trade deadline. So more of this discourse potentially is on deck for us. Unless the Bruins make a move at some point, please give us something else to talk about.
We should make a deal that next time we do a podcast, we do not talk about the deadline unless there's like a hot rumor that we got to sink our teeth into.
That's fine. I will take anything at this point. We're gonna be get ready to learn 4 Nations face-off, buddy, because that's what we're talking about next week. So.
You covering it?
I will be in Boston for it. I will be at home for those ones. I'm not going up to Montreal for that. Which is too bad. I think like Media Day and all this stuff is actually up there. So if you actually wanted to talk to a lot of the players, that's probably your best bet of doing it. But I'm looking forward to actually seeing it in Boston, seeing some actual good hockey on the Garden Ice. Has not happened this year all that much. You got the Beanpot and then a few games here and there, and that's about it. Even though the Beanpot games, they were just blowouts. So Monday's game should be good between BU and that team from Newton. Speaking of which, if
Newton College, I believe, right?
I believe so. I think they always say that it's technically within the city limits. Someone brings out some like BC person who didn't even graduate there. They just like BC for some reason. They will post a PDF of like an old city like planning from like 1794, and it shows like a little sliver of land like right where like Conti Forum now is, like the old Boston. This is where we're actually on Boston city limits. And no, you guys are Newton. I digress. But if you do though want to go to the Beanpot on Monday to see the Boston University Terriers, America's greatest college hockey team, face off against the Newton Pigeons, you have to go to Game Time tickets. Holiday season has come and gone, but rejoice, sports fans, because the big game is finally here, and the Patriots are not playing. They're not that good this year. They're not going to be in the big game. But if you want to make a quick trip down to NOLA, go to the big game, or maybe more realistically, catch a Bruins or Celtics game at the Garden, you got to go with Game Time tickets. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NFL, NBA, and NHL tickets. Patriots might be done, but you want to catch the Bruins against the Ducks in February? How about the Celtics against the Spurs? Game Time tickets has you covered. Game Time Tickets app makes it easy to sort through which specific game, concert, or other event you want to attend and shows you the best spots available to take in the action. Game Time has a feature called Game Time Picks, which makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Game Time Tickets also has you cover the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry, including event cancellation protection, 24-hour return guarantee, job loss assurance, and on-time ticket delivery. So what are you waiting for? Take the guesswork out of buying football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Shout out once again to Game Time Tickets and the Boston University Terriers, future Beanpot champions. Ty, before we wrap this up, looking ahead at this offseason, and I think we've talked a whole lot about what the future is of Don Sweeney and Cam Neely. We've talked a lot about this roster and what we expect to be a pretty busy summer for this team in terms of overhauling and shuffling some of the pieces around there. Where do you think the coaching staff also falls into the equation here in terms of, do you think that I think regardless of whoever is running the ship in terms of management, are they looking at kind of a complete clean slate there and looking at bringing in kind of a new set of coaches to kind of, again, lead this, whatever we want to call it, aggressive retool going into 25 and beyond?
I mean, you definitely should, right? You look at where they are. They're bottom 10 in both goals for and goals against. They are bottom 3 in power play. Their PK, which is usually their strong suit and something Joe Sacco has run for years, is the 11th worst unit in hockey this year, which I think might be a low under Joe Sacco. I imagine it is, because they've been, if you do it, if you aggregate it over his window here, like they're, I think, the best team in the league or second behind Carolina. So I can't imagine they've ever finished worse than where they are right now. So you look at it from that standpoint, and this would be a time where you would say, you know what, whole new fresh set of eyes, fresh set of ideas, whatever the case may, whatever term you want to use. But it's interesting, right? Because like Chris Kelly originally joined the team in a front office role. Right. He worked with their prospects and, off ice kind of stuff, would do some on ice stuff as well. So do you try to transition him back to that? Do you, Jay Leach was a guy you brought back after he left to go to Seattle. Jay Leach is a guy that I think there are people in that organization are still very high on him. I think mainly I want to say Cam Neely is a big Leach guy. And didn't want to lose him the first time around, but understood why they did. And so, like, it's kind of interesting, right? And obviously, Joe Sacco has been a good soldier for 11 years. You kind of feel bad that this is the chance he's getting, right? Like, it's coming with this kind of roster, this kind of team with these kind of problems. But if there's ever a time to kind of blow it all out and start anew, it is during a season where you're bottom 10 in pretty much every category, right? And so. I'd be shocked if there weren't sizable changes. And by that I mean at least 3 new guys brought in, right? Like, yeah. Maybe you keep a couple, maybe you transition their roles, you find a new way to kind of get something out of them. But I have a hard time believing that everything is going to be safe after a season where, like, let me just ask you, what do they do well? What's one thing they do well that you can point to and go, they got great coaching there. I love that part of their game. You got to keep it. And we're going to exclude Bob Asenza because that guy has survived like 9 coaching changes.
Yeah. What do they do well? They're really good at having us talking about the same things on podcasts for months on end, Ty. That's about it, because they keep on doing the same mistakes. They're not very good at a lot of things.
They built a heavier team that it's not like they dominate board battles. It's not like they dominate the game physically, right? They got bigger and they got heavier, but they don't play that way, right? And so is that coaching, or is that identifying talent and identifying it incorrectly? Who does that fall back on more? It's kind of like what we talked about with Jim Montgomery when they fired him. It's, yeah, the roster's not great, but your job is to get the most out of said roster, no matter what it is, right? And we've seen limitations to that as we kicked off the show talking about. But, I think that your coaching has to work with the ingredients they have, right? And I don't think you've seen enough of that. And so whether that is the players themselves, which is a greater overarching discussion about the front office and who's making those kind of decisions. But at ice level, I don't think coaching is overcoming some of their problems right now. And so you should change it up. I don't know what you change exactly, but it feels like this is the year to do that for sure.
Yeah, and I agree. Like, it is tough for Sacco to have this opportunity when the team is, again, the roster in front of him is also not that great. But yeah, it does feel like if you're going to this offseason, you are changing things around. That is a place you have to start. And whether it's bringing a coach that plays to the strengths that you're trying to make, which again, like I don't even know if that's what it should be the priority, because I don't even know what the identity of this roster should be, right? Like, I'd rather just have like a coach that changes things up, adds like a fresh perspective in terms of like how they want to do the power play, like new ideas, right, in terms of what they need to do, without necessarily putting a square peg in a round hole. But beyond that, I think it's just changing the urgency of how they practice, how they, it's kind of like when Cassidy took over, and it's a lot of just changing like their overall approach. And it's like, hey, like a lot of the same guys are really good with Claude, are there with Bruce Cassidy, but like just because they're the same player and they've played in a pretty familiar structure for a couple of years, we're going to change things around because we think we can unlock more XYZ out of said players. So if it means like, I look at like Spencer Carberry and like the job he's done with the Capitals, like they've got a lot of established talent there, but a lot of guys are also have elevated their play. And it's like, you watch the way they play. And I think it's just the mindset, the mentality, the message that gets preached to that team. Like, they are always skating their ass off. They're blocking shots. They're playing with a high level of, intensity and effort. And I think that's why you're seeing that team just collectively buy in this year, and you're seeing those results. So it's like, I think just having a new voice and tweaking things with your roster to try to get more out of these players, what do you have to do? Like, if it means a fresh perspective on the power play, their approach, I just think, like the way this team is built, it's you need a fresh set of eyes there. And I think it starts with the coaching, and then, making those tweaks to the roster as well. But if there's ever a time to do it, as you said, it's got to be now, because if there's ever a time to really kind of uproot a lot of the things with this team, especially for a team that just is not doing anything really well right now. They're not relying on one strength other than David Pastrnak and most nights Jeremy Swayman to build them out. You got to change the message, the messaging, the mindset, the identity, whatever it is. And I think a new coach and a new staff can help you in that regard.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Like you look at how they built Team Canada for the Four Nations, right? Like, Don Sweeney is the GM of that team, as we know. They also,
I watched the TNT broadcast. Yes,
that's right. You also heard about Matt Rempe and how he's actually a great victim of circumstance.
And God,
nevertheless, so you build up that roster, right? And you look at the coaching staff of that team, right? You have John Cooper. He ain't going anywhere. Bruce Cassidy, been there, done that. That ain't happening again. You have Pete DeBoer. He's not leaving. But you also have an assistant coach there. Misha Donskov. I believe I'm saying his name correctly. Currently an assistant coach with Dallas. Before that was an assistant with the Vegas Golden Knights. Was actually in their front office as well. Director of hockey ops. Is that a guy that the Bruins could look at and go, he won a cup in Vegas. He's got experience in the front office. That's our guy. That's the guy we look at and we say we want to bring him in. And he was with London in the OHL before that. He was their assistant GM. I think he was an assistant coach there with Dale Hunter as well. I might be wrong on the second part, but I know he's with London. But like, these Four Nations things, this is a chance where guys and management get to kind of see a guy's work ethic, right? They see how a guy operates and how he approaches things, get inside of his mind. And that's something that, as Sweeney talked about, like you talk to the coaches and you get to pick their brain. Is that a potential for Don Sweeney to look at that guy and go, I like the cut of his jib here. I like this guy. Would that be a guy that they could try to bring in the offseason? Like, I'd wonder, because I honestly, I don't know about you. I'm operating under the assumption that this coaching staff is not going to be coming back next year. There's going to be a heavy change. I think there's going to be a new head coach at the very least. That's just how I feel right now. So if you do that, are you using the Four Nations to kind of scout those guys? Because I think if they do bring in a new head coach, it's got to be a guy that I think NHL experience is a must. I think whether it's Mike Sullivan, whether it's an assistant who was a head coach, so if you don't have that experience behind a bench, do you get a guy who had experience in a secondary role on a team that won a championship? That's probably the next best thing. I don't think I want a college coach. You
don't want David. You don't want Carl.
No, I mean,
yeah.
It's not that I don't feel.
I feel like he's better equipped for a younger team that has a lot of you have a 4 or 5 year plan, right?
Yeah.
I think that.
Give me the guy who was an assistant on Bruce Cassidy's staff when they won it. Give me the guy who is an assistant on Pete DeBoer's staff. That Dallas team, I think they're such a well-oiled machine that if you're not picking up information from Pete DeBoer, then what the hell are we doing here? And so I think that's what I would like. If you can't get that guy, get the guy who's learned from those guys, right? And so that's kind of where I am with that. And I was big on when the Bruins were first looking in 2022 after they fired Cassidy. One guy I brought up that I don't think got enough play at the time because he was too young. But I said Ryan Warsofsky. He was at that point he's in Chicago. But I was like, Bruins are an old team, not going to work for a young guy, first timer. But then you see what San Jose has done, and I know they're not a great team, but you can see what they're building, right? You can see it. You watch them; they're competitive, they play hard. I think they got to get some blend of that, so to speak. So a pure college guy, I'm a little iffy on, but an experienced.
You want the 45.
Assistance.
You want the 45-year-old guy who's been in the league and is ready for his breakout.
Yeah, or has just learned from the best staffs, and the best coaches that the game has. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like the guy who's been the number 2 for a great head coach that has an amazing NHL program. That's what I want.
The Bruins are gonna go talk to Don Skov at Four Nations. They're like, this guy's pretty good. Dale Hunter, you're hired. They're gonna bring in Dale Hunter, which listen, that's fine because Dale Hunter. I mean, I can't imagine he's ever gonna leave London, but that dude just turns out a winning program, and they all come out, and the London Knights, they just bring out a roster full of dickheads, and it's awesome.
Oh yeah. No, that's why I like this guy because he's been in Vegas, he's been in Dallas. Before that, he was in London. I love all 3 of those programs. I love their organizations. I love how they developed. I love how they identify talent. And if you can, again, it's a copycat league, but what I think you have in common with Vegas and Dallas. In terms of copycat, they're really good at identifying what it is they do well and just hammering that, right? They are not one of these franchises that I look at and go, yeah, they're good, but what are they? Year to year, no, they have a program that is just produces results pretty much every year, and so I would like to take from those programs if I can. It's to cross sports here. It's like the Patriots. I would love it if the Patriots could get Howie Roseman's number 2. Whoever that guy is, I don't know who that guy is, but I want him here. That's who I want to run things here because I look at that program and I go, they are good every year. There's something in that water. They know how to identify talent. They know how to get the most out of guys that you think are cooked or done. They made that guy who was one of the top 5 picks of the Jets. They made him from a bum to a starting level offensive lineman. You're okay, all right, great. Same thing in Dallas, where Dallas brings in these guys that you look at that were bought out or had miserable years wherever they were, and they come in and they're right back to being an amazing talent for them. And it's and they hit on drafts, all that. So go to the Dallas well, go to the Vegas well. Just so happens one of those guys is on Team Canada's coaching staff. I would start building that relationship right now if I'm the Bruins.
Yep. We will see how it all plays out, but it does feel like something's got to give with that coaching staff moving forward. Ty, before we let you go, where can we read your stuff? Where can we hear you on the airwaves? All that good stuff.
Yeah, you can. Oh, sorry. Oops. You can hear me on 98.5 The Sports Hub. You can also hear me at 98.5thesportshub.com. The podcast there, The Sports Hub Underground, I do with my friend Matt Dolph. And you can find me on social media at _Ty Anderson. Pretty much everywhere. So that's where you can find me. How about yourself?
Yes, you can read my stuff over at Boston.com and the Boston Globe. We have covered every step of the way this Bruins season with recaps, features, columns, breakdowns, all that good stuff. You can also find me on Twitter, X, whatever the hell it's called, at Conor Ryan _93. Ty, thank you once again for being on the show. This was episode 302 of Poke the Bear. You fans have a great rest of your week.